Hello there everybody, Blue Onion here, and today I'm going to be reviewing all of the modules in the game, so let's just get straight into it again. There's a total of 28 modules, but I swear to god sometimes it really doesn't feel like so. Some of them feel like completely unplayable, you would never use them, but we'll get into that later. For now, let's just start off, I guess, with the tier 1s, then we'll go tier 2 and tier 3, how they are listed in here. So first up, we got back hit. So what do I really have to say about back hit? I don't know, it's consistent. I wouldn't really call it overpowered. It's just a good module that's always useful, particularly if you're running, for instance. I would say this would be super useful on Mammoth, but you can also make an argument that Emergency would go on Mammoth better, because you can't have both at once. It's just that, like, for example, Mammoth's backside is super large. I think that goes without saying. But that basically means that this effect would be applied to it way more than on any other tank. But then again, Emergency would heal you more. I don't know, but it's like very specific. In general, though, it shouldn't. This is like really limited to a specific tank or even playstyle. This could be used basically anywhere, and it always gets the same value. I wouldn't really call it overpowered. At max level, it can do like 23% resistance, which is barely a bit less than a normal shot. So it just basically removes the weakness of back shots for your tank. I don't know. Again, not really overpowered. Works very well on offense. On offense, I'd much rather have this than, for instance, Emergency once again. But other than that, I don't know. Don't really have much of an opinion about this thing. Probably my most used one, but also the one I have to say the least about. I mean, it just helps you reduce the downside. Wouldn't really call it overpowered. Probably a B tier. Right, I guess that's it. Let's move on. Next up, we have EMP. Oh god, EMP is one of the, I don't know. It's a bit of a toss-up. Because EMP, it can be absolutely useless in certain situations, but in a whole lot of scenarios, it can actually be just like a complete fight winner. It's ridiculous. EMP can completely shut down an opponent's push. It can make someone such a sitting duck. You can just hammer away at them and they can't do anything. They can't fight back for like quite a long time. I think this one's actually a bit strong. I'm not sure. Is it A or S tier though? I feel like if supply boxes were a bit weaker in this game, like the ones that fall from the sky, it'd be an A tier. but I just think that this one needs to be S tier. Simply because, like, let's say someone picks up double armor, right? Well, you can just drive up to him, use the MP, and there goes his double armor. That's it. It's gone. No other module can just, like, do that. And on top of that, he can't really fight back. He can't use his own modules, you know. It's also very good on defense, because let's say you have an attacker coming in with speed boost, right? You can use it. It takes away a speed boost. That's it. He's done. He's screwed. He's not going to do anything. Not only does it also take away a speed boost, you can't use any other module, so you can't do invulnerability, for instance, which also screws him over a lot. And what's even better, something that I didn't realize for quite a long time, this thing also disables passive modules. So let's say someone had adrenaline, yeah, that adrenaline's not gonna work anymore. Let's say back hit also counters that, but again, it only lasts for a few seconds, so it's not really that big of a deal. But just yeah, a slight little bonus on top of what it already does. For those reasons, I just think it's an S tier. Yeah, sure, it has a bit of a cooldown. Yeah, it doesn't really do damage or anything, but it just, oh my god, it just ruins your opponent. It, like, if they have some specific strategy they're trying to pull off, you use this thing, bam, they're done. It also has like a pretty decent range. Like 20 meters is no joke if you ask me. I don't even know what's the max range on this thing. It could be in like 25 meters. I have no idea. Also, at max level, 4.5 seconds stun. Come on, man. I think that's S tier. It's gotta be. Next up, Engineer. Bit of a mediocre module. I feel like the main problem with this thing is, like I just said, EMP counters supply boxes really hard, and this thing boosts supply boxes. So if anyone's running EMP, this is basically useless. It's okay for an offensive tank, I guess, but you're going to be missing out on other important modules. Because for me, I don't know, I'd most likely pick, for example, Lifesteal over it, simply because it can be really clutch in those offensive situations. So for offense, it's not really the best, I would say, because you're generally not going to need more than 30 seconds of a supply when going in there. It's also a bit situational, because it only affects you if you actually, first of all, have map control, and second, actually have the map control at the correct time to get the supply box. I guess this could be used as a sort of good module for control type playstyles, where it's like you're just sitting at some important point of the map and chipping away at everyone. That important point of the map does, however, have to have supply boxes, which most of them do, I would say. Actually, probably all of them do. Yeah, any important spot will probably drop you supply boxes, and those are important to control anyways. And this giving you a little bit of a bonus is kind of good in that situation, but it's a bit situational. And outside of that, it's not very useful. I'd say in most situations, I'd probably have back hit over this. I don't know. Like, it could be good, but you're relying on your enemy not having EMP or any other dumb stuff. And you're also relying on your team to have map control for this to work and, you know, not take the supply boxes and leave them for the important people. Which, consequently, while using Distinct, you're arguably not very important to have the supply box. Unless it's like damage and you are playing control. Yeah, for damage this is pretty good. But outside of that, I don't know. C or B? Maybe somewhere in between? I have no idea where to put this. I might just put it in C here just because this thing is more useful more often of the time than Engineer is. But yeah, I think I'll leave it here for now. Maybe I'll move it up later. Okay, Armor is next. So, Armor, I don't know. Armor is actually really weak at low levels, but it gets really, really solid at high levels. The main problem with Armor is EMP again. EMP counters everything. It's absolutely destroying it. But you need to win a fight. EMP annihilates everything, and that includes Armor. But outside of that, it's pretty good once you do level it up. You can take quite a bit of damage with this thing. Generally not very useful on high mobility tanks, since typically you're going to be running things that are going to actually help you out a bit more to get the flag. For instance, Invulnerability and Speed Boost probably. Those are probably the two most common ones. And replacing Invulnerability with Armor, especially in this state of the game, I wouldn't do it personally. It's a risky pick. It's probably not even going to be that valuable. It's more based for like combat tanks, and it's pretty good at that, I guess. And outside of that, doesn't really have that much more uses because all the other modules are typically more specified to do greater things than this thing can. But for combat, I don't know. I say it's pretty balanced. B tier? The question is it above or below back hit defense? That's a tough one. One's a passive. It's tough to compare these two because one's a passive and one you toggle every like 40 seconds. I feel like it might go above. Maybe I'll just do this for now. We'll see later. Right, next up, the Mine. I don't know. Nothing really to say about the Mine. It's a bit strong in its current state since I've noticed the user doesn't take self-damage anymore from it. But outside of that, I wouldn't really call the Mine overpowered or underpowered. I feel like it's just where it needs to be. I just wish that the visibility of it was a bit higher. Because right now, if you're going like as fast... Because like right now, if you're using a fast tank and there's mines planted, you have no way of knowing that they're there, and therefore no way of countering them except for invulnerability, which I think shouldn't be the case. But still, it's not really that big of a deal, especially since every light hole does currently run invulnerability when attacking, you know, so I don't know. I feel like this one's a B tier. Above or below back, it might put it below back. Next up, Radar. Radar's a bit specific. The main problem with Radar is, of course, that it doesn't really do anything besides give you information, which typically, at least in matchmaking, isn't really that useful. You could make an argument for this that it's useful on big maps, especially talking like Ares. Yeah, I could see this thing being useful on Ares, just that I never play Ares, because that map, I hate that map. Ares. But anyways, this thing can be useful in TDM situations, not really in CTF. So I actually used to use this thing with Shaft, like all the time I play Shaft, but I recently switched to Extra Mag and found more success like that anyways, with the current state of Shaft. I don't know. Radar, is it a B or a C tier? I feel like I'm going to give it a low B tier, just because it can be good, but in most situations you'd rather have something else. Next up is Rage, and I have a feeling this is going to be the worst tier 1 module. So Rage... Alright, let's just put this thing straight into D tier. My main problem with Rage is that it really doesn't do much at all. So Rage basically gives you supply cooldowns upon every single kill. But this ability itself has a cooldown. And the time of the abilities that you receive for every kill is actually really, really small. Like, it's at max level, it's 3 seconds. What kind of difference does that make? Like, let's say you get like 20 average kills per match, right? So if you have this thing maxed out, you're going to get basically a minute off your modules. But I find this design to be so flawed because, first of all, it barely does anything throughout the entire match. Second, you're not always going to be like on recharge on all of your modules. I would say that playing this thing properly, which is like spamming modules, is like kind of a bad way to play the game because at times you're not going to have the modules you need. And if you're just going to be trying to get value from this thing, it's going to be screwing you more often than not. On top of that, it's kind of a competitive slot. There's already like a couple better options here. It competes with Engineer, and then It also has a very fierce rival up here in the tier 2s, which I'll get to, which in my opinion is completely outclassing this thing, but whatever. D tier for it, low impact, encourages a bad playstyle, and on top of that even has a cooldown for some reason. I don't understand this module, it's weird. Next up, Repair Kit. I feel like this one's, I don't know, is it average or is it above average? I'm not sure. Repair Kit isn't like mandatory to run in every single setup, but in a few it can be quite good. I think I'll put it in A tier. Good in TDM, good in CTF. Not quite the best in CTF in terms of tanking ability, I would say. But it definitely has its uses. Very good for control type playstyles, I would say, because you can really keep up the pressure. And I just noticed this tier list made a bit of a shape here, so let's just move on and get rid of it. All right, next up, Speed Boost. Useless in TDM, but I would argue just because it's like basically meta in CTF. If you're gonna be attacking, you're gonna want to bring Speed Boost of your own, because relying on supply boxes and teammates not picking them up is kind of atrocious. So yeah, you should probably have at least one of these on your team. I generally run Speed Boost every time I play CTF as an offensive light hull. Sometimes even as a heavy hull, because it just opens up a bit more mobility. It's kind of counterproductive to use this as a heavy, but if you just want to have fun, it's an option for you, sure. Not much to really say about Speed Boost, just extra speed, extra mobility, very good in CTF. Might even put this above Repair. Yeah, in some situations this is basically a dead module, but I feel like in CTF, very, very useful all the time, just has to go to the top of A tier, or at least above Repair Kit. Because the difference between these two is one actually allows you to escape, while the other one, you're going to have more resilience, but you're probably still going to die trying. You get me? That's why I would rather run this in CTF over. But, you know, I mainly like to play CTF. I imagine most people do too. I know there are some TDM players out there, but for me, CTF is just the more unique game mode with more playstyles. That's why I like it more. Next up, we got Temperature Block. So, Temperature Block, it's a bit interesting. It's good with Vulcan, I guess, but even then, the thing with Vulcan is, typically when I'm using Vulcan, I'm not gonna try to go on a kill streak or anything. I'm just gonna be trying to break open their walls, basically stuff like that. I don't know. For me, this thing isn't really that useful. It's good for offensive tanks, I guess, when you're going up against Freeze or Firebird and you're trying to get the flag. I don't know. Right now it's looking like a C tier module, maybe above Engineer. I'm not quite sure about that. These two are about equal. I don't know. It's a damn tough choice between them. It depends on the matchup, right? Especially, they have to have like something that has temperature, or else this is a dead module. I'd put this a lot higher if it would actually protect you against freeze traps, because currently, I don't want to spoil anything, but freeze traps are kind of a big deal currently. And this thing, while it does help you a little bit against them, it doesn't work how I want it to work. Because basically freeze trap, it freezes you to like a set maximum temperature for an amount of time, right? And then after that amount of time passes, you start to actually unthaw. And that's only when this module kicks in. It doesn't work for the first seconds where you're put to the set temperature. And I think that that's quite sad. That's why it's going in C tier. It's useful with Vulcan, but that's about it. I would, I guess it counters Fiery Ring, but why would you want to play around Fiery Ring? I would never know. Right, we're done with that. Getting into the tier 2s now. So, first one, Accelerated Gears. This was pretty garbage, I'll be honest. So Accelerated Gears, it has two sort of major uses that I would see. It's good for heavy hulls and for using shaft. It's not really good at anything else. In fact, I find it more of a hindrance everywhere else than of actual help, because it screws with my muscle memory a lot. It also works really, really poorly with invisibility, because every time you rotate a turret, the sparks come off even if you're invisible, which is a bit of a design flaw, but whatever. For the longest time, I actually didn't know about this module. I thought it boosted your acceleration speed of the hull as well, but I recently found out that it doesn't, and it's really awful. What a shame. I wish it did, at least a bit. This thing needs a buff. It's really bad. Sure, shaft players might get some use out of it, but it really isn't mandatory. Same thing for heavy hulls. You might as well just pack a bit of extra heat instead of this mostly dead module. Like, what are those like 0.2 seconds gonna change of your like turret rotation? For that reason, C or D, I'm not sure. It does have a use. I feel like it's better than Rage, but Is it much better than anything else? I kind of doubt. It's just not useful in any typical playstyle or scenario ever. It's basically a dead module in most of your games, unless you're playing Shaft or Heavy Hull in TDM with like at least 3 IZ spotting you for health to not be a concern. Next up, Adrenaline. So Adrenaline, I see it as kind of a better version of Rage. I feel like this is one of the more underrated modules. Basically what Adrenaline does is after you get low, your damage increases and you recharge all your other abilities way faster. It of course goes above D, probably above C. B or A is the question though. I feel like low A tier would do this thing. So it's a bit counterintuitive because it encourages you to be on low health. But it does reward you quite well for it. That damage boost can actually stack with other damage boosts, and you can end up dealing like a lot of damage. You're just a complete glass cannon with this thing when you're actually in effect. And again, it just, in my opinion, this thing does the module recharging thing better. You don't even have to kill people with it. You could just be low and get assists. It doesn't encourage a bad playstyle per se. I would argue this still encourages a sort of bad playstyle, but it's a lot better than this thing because it actually rewards you properly. It doesn't like force you to go exclusively for kills. It could be useful just getting a lot of damage on your opponents. It can be used in quite a few sets. Particularly, I found it really good with Izida for those clutch situations, since Izida doesn't really get that much use out of its turret's passive anyways. Yeah, solid A tier. Let's move on. Next up, damage boost. I feel like damage boost might be an A tier as well. Probably above here. It's self-explanatory. It's just more damage. Good stuff. Hard to really say this is a bad module. Useful in basically any build except for like maybe defense whenever you're trying to like freeze people. It actually combos pretty well together with Adrenaline if you can stay alive for those 10 seconds this thing is active. Next up, Forcefield. Honestly, another pretty good module. I don't know where to put this. The question is, do I value Repair Kit or Forcefield more? I feel like I value Forcefield more just because this thing is a bit strong right now. It's not exactly game-breaking, but it just feels a little bit unfair to me. You just control a part of the map completely for free. The enemy doesn't really have any counterplay available to them within the amount of time that this thing exists. It's a bit of an oppressive module, but I don't know. It's above average. I'd say it's above average just because of how many shots you can tank. Or for example, you can completely tank a shaft shot, in which case the repair kit would not save you. I don't know. Versatile. It has a bit of a cooldown, but I think it's worth the cooldown. Could use a slight duration nerf in my opinion, but other than that, this was pretty good. Alright, next up, Impulse Generator. This is one of the more like fun modules, I would say. I don't know. I have fun with this thing. Bit of a gimmick, but it can be effective at times, particularly when the enemy is charging you and like tries to jump over you or something. You can just throw him off and completely ruin their entire push. I love this module! That's so fun! Other than that situation, it's not very useful. I feel this module is quite map dependent. For example, you could find a lot of use for it probably on Rio, let's say. Since there's a lot of verticality, people jump a lot from stuff. It can actually be used pretty well for offense too, because when you like dash in there, you can push the enemy out of the way if there's like a mammoth on the flag. It's like the perfect counter. It does also a little bit of damage, but it's nothing spectacular. I don't know, this one feels like a pretty average module to me. Above or below mine? I think it's below mine, but above radar. This looks good. It's useful, and in those situations where it is like useful, it's pretty damn useful, but it can also be pretty bad at situations where you just don't find a use for it. It's a weird module, but I think B represents it pretty well. Shouldn't really be changed in my opinion. Next up, we have Impulse Jump. Oh dear. So there's a couple of problems with this thing. I feel like the main problem is it encourages a bad playstyle, kind of like Rage, except it doesn't even reward you for that bad playstyle necessarily. It's a really high skill cap module. I feel like this module is going straight into the cringe tier. I try to make it work, but I just really ended up getting steamrolled all the times I tried to play this stupid gimmick module. It's fun, but it's very ineffective. Most of the time, you barely find the use for it. I don't know. Ends up being a dead module. Sometimes you flip with it. You just... it's not good. And typically, if the enemy is playing seriously, they're going to notice your marginal disadvantage and they're just going to steamroll you. Like, what are you going to do? You have impulse jump. You can't, like, stop them with... You basically have a way harder time competing in combat, competing in positioning. It's just... it's not a good module. It puts you at such a disadvantage for such a minor thing that's very gimmicky, situational, hard to pull off. The cooldown is fast, but that's the only thing. What's the point of having a fast cooldown if the ability sucks? It's not useful on the majority of the maps. I don't know. Rio, maybe. It's only really useful with Railgun and stuff. Maybe Thunder if you're lucky. I just found that more often than not, when I use this thing, I just get completely rolled because I don't have enough ability to fight people or to run away from fights. It's ridiculous. The only use really is Railgun and making flashy meme plays, but those meme plays don't win you the game. There is one potential situation. Wasp, jump over the flag, just safety somewhere, pass it to a teammate that's more capable of carrying it anyways because you're pretty crippled. Other than that, this thing is bad. It's so difficult to pull off. And the reward typically isn't worth the risk anyways. Not to mention, if you're taking off and somebody shoots you, you're basically as good as dead. And it's only useful on the Wasp and the Hornet. I've seen some people try using it with Viking on Area 159 to get the flag up to a safe position. But that's it. That's the only upside this thing has outside of those two holes. And again, even then, you're giving up so much like ability to fight. So yeah, this thing's a gimmick. Let's just be real here. No one's gonna seriously use this thing consistently. Next up, Invis. Bit of an interesting one. I don't know. I feel like this is a B tier module. It's kind of situational in when do you want to use it. But in the few situations where you do find it useful, it's really good. One of the main situations I would say is old school. No matter if it's TDM or CTF, you can just sneak up behind the enemy, especially because of all the fog and the rain and the thick grass that's typically there. It can be used on other maps quite efficiently, but it's a bit of a gimmick on other maps. I'd call it a legit strat in old school though, for sure. Sad part is you're either giving up another mobility option, such as speed boost or even jump if you're a crazy person, or a repair kit instead. And this thing also doesn't work very well with speed or accelerated because they see the enemies see the freaking things when you're using them. So yeah, hard countered by radar, but I think it goes above radar. It's got the short cooldown. Yeah, the ability itself isn't very long, but it's typically long enough to make the play that you want to make. Just that you give up some combat ability, but I don't find it as big of an issue as with this thing, because at least you get the element of surprise, and like a decent one. Sure, this thing can give you an element of surprise, but it's not that efficient. It's just not efficient compared to this. Because with this, you're actually going to have a useful playstyle that's going to be going for our objective. And this, more often than not, is going to end with you flipping over, so I think my point is obvious. Next up, Kamikaze. A bit of a weird module, rewards you for dying, but it can be quite useful if you're trying to play the wall breaker sort of style, where you basically go in and distract all the stuff and distract all the defending enemies while someone else with a faster hold that's more capable of capping heats the flag from under the noses and runs away. This can be pretty good if you're also looking to just assassinate a specific target, for example, Anizida as Hammer. Because if you're going to end up dying there, you're still going to do like a large amount of damage, if not kill them. Doesn't really feel that overpowered, but it does feel like a pretty decent module. I don't know. I feel like I might put it above Impulse Generator. It's just kind of sad because this thing has to compete with some of the other modules. Two other pretty good competitors that I would consider more viable most of the time, that being Adrenaline and one mystery one that I haven't talked about yet, which I would argue is the best turret passive in the game, period. Anyways, next up, Zapper. Absolute cringe. Gonna put it even below Impulse Jump. I hate this module. It doesn't make sense. It's weak. It's situational. And overall, it's just not impactful on the game. I mean, wow, look guys. I took, at max level, 53% less damage from my mine. Wow, this module helped us a lot. Like, who cares about that? Sure, if you're an offensive tank, this might help you. But if you're an offensive tank, you're also running invulnerability. So mine shouldn't be that big of a concern to you. And as an offensive tank, if you trip a mine, regardless of if you have Zapper or not, I would argue your run is already over. You should just give up and try again. You could argue this has some place in the wall breaker playstyle I mentioned just before with Kamikaze, where you can trip the mines. And yeah, I guess that's true, but is it really gonna matter that much? I would personally rather bring Kamikaze or Adrenaline into that situation, definitely. Also recently tested this with Ice Trap. It only reduces damage. It doesn't reduce duration at all, so another reason to absolutely flame this thing. But yeah, this is, I don't know, this might just be the worst module in the game. It's situational, low impact, has a cooldown for some reason. Why? It's already bad enough as is. Why does it need a cooldown? Even if it is short, I don't care. It's just awful. I don't think I've ever legitimately used this in a match of Tanki X, ever, outside of randomized TX. I'm serious, guys. I've never used this thing in matchmaking. Just because of how situational it is. It's ridiculous. Why would anyone use this? Alright, next up, Spider-Man was actually pretty decent in the original game, but it got kind of hammered by the bad servers of Revive Tanki X. It's just super laggy right now, and therefore it's super slow. It doesn't catch up to anything. Rarely ever kills anyone. Yeah, it can give you a bit of like control over where your opponent is going to move, but other than that, it's pretty awful. Long cooldown, mediocre damage. Again, bad movement, doesn't catch up to anything. So it's mostly just a dead. Don't remember ever making a build with Spider-Man, and probably not planning to do anything about it until they actually fix the movement. Not to mention the AI is currently super bad, gets stuck around walls a lot. It's funny watching some of the cases where it just sucks. Spider-Man's chasing him. Oh, that Spider-Man AI is a bit questionable. Again, low impact, not winning you the game. You give up mobility, you give up survivability. Just not a good module right now. Hasn't been even in the original game, I would argue, and especially not right now because it's buggy as hell. That's why it goes in D tier. Actually, I think it's more useful than accelerated gears, but only just, okay? Next up, we got emergency. I feel like this is one of the better modules in the game. Prevents death, is very useful on defense. Ends up potentially saving you against explosive mass. I feel like this is the top of A tier. Just a good solid module. Yeah, you are a bit of a sitting duck, but it does allow, but in the time that you are frozen, it allows your teammates to kind of deal with the threat that's been giving you the stuff. And in general, just is a pretty good distraction. I'm emergency bait.
Die. He's dead. What's
He's
up?
one. Okay. What else to say about it? Long cooldown, but the cooldown is most likely worth it. Although it does get hard countered by EMP, but I find that generally using EMP on this thing alone is not very worth it. Next up, explosive mass. This is a bit of a controversial one. It really depends on the map and game mode. Let's just say I'll judge this off like an average of like 6v6, talking about Iran here. I don't know. I feel like I should give this thing two different placements. So first of all, for like large maps, particularly for silence, it's only 8 versus 8, but the map is so compact that typically you can get like lots of good multi-kills with this. I definitely put this in A tier somewhere, not quite sure where. It's just really controversial and difficult to place. But on a more balanced map like Iran, and just in general matchmaking, it's a bit weak simply because of the cooldown. Yeah, it can insta-kill people, but it's counterable in a couple of ways actually. And the long cooldown makes it really unreliable. I feel like I'll leave this in C tier. In most situations, not very useful when compared with other modules. Just because you're going to be getting more value out of those other modules more often than this thing. And even when you can use this thing, you shouldn't always use it. There's actually times where you should hold on to it instead. So, I don't know. It's just kind of mediocre. It's kind of mediocre when you consider all of the possible scenarios, and it's also not very viable to run in many different sets, although it does make a very good combo that's absolutely deadly with the EMP. But again, let's say someone has emergency, let's say someone has invulnerability, which are both quite popular modules. You're not going to be killing them with this thing anytime soon. Next up, extra mag. This one's a bit dependent on the turret, but generally you can get a lot of use for this in Shaft, in Railgun, in Thunder, and sometimes in Ricochet. Also Firebird's pretty good with this, but nobody uses Firebird. I don't know. I feel like this is a pretty good module on the turrets where it is available. A tier probably, it's not a must run, but it's really, really good most of the time. I'm just not quite sure where to put it. I feel like I'll put it just below damage right here. This looks like a good spot for it, when you consider all the situations you could possibly use it in. This just allows you to do extra damage. It's pretty good when you need to like quickly kill someone. Next up, Fiery Ring. This thing is, oh my god, this thing is cringe. So, Fiery Ring. I rarely see people actually get killed by this thing. I don't know why would anyone want to run Fire Ring. The main problem with Fire Ring, if you ask me, is that it doesn't fit any playstyle in this goddamn game. It's ridiculous. Like, say we're running Fire Ring with some ranged turret. Okay, great. Suddenly, you're missing out on a repair kit, you're potentially missing out on a Forcefield or something like that. So immediately, you already have a lot less control. All you have instead is this damage option. It's quite pathetic and has a long cooldown. Okay. So let's say we try and make it work. Not very useful with those long range turrets unless someone gets up in your face, and even then, it's not going to immediately save you. Okay, so what about close range turrets then? Well, for close range turrets, we got Izida, we got Firebird, we got Freeze, and we got Hammer. The problem is that Firebird already sets people on fire itself. So why are you running this thing? The other problem is that freeze already freezes people. So why are you unfreezing your opponent? Oh my god, it's just bad. I see that. It's more important to probably stay alive with immunities and repair kits or speed boost to get to your team faster, to heal them up faster. Hammer typically is going to want to bring speed boost and something else. It already does a crap ton of damage. Why does it need this awful module to go with it? I don't understand. There's just no use case. Long range turrets don't benefit from it. Close range turrets still don't benefit from it. I don't understand how to use this module. It's ineffective. It's slow. It deals very little damage. I've never seen this kill people. I think I've used this seriously once when it came out, and that's it. I dropped it immediately because it was so underwhelming. At max, you're not going to do more than 1.5k burn damage anyways, probably. And besides that, people can get extinguished in many different ways. And even then, after burn damage isn't that scary, guys. Because he's not killing you immediately. He's just putting you on a timer. So it's like, what the hell? This thing does nothing. I don't understand. I would argue it might be just better than Spider-Man right now because it at least guarantees the damage in the correct situation. Or you'd think at least. But I just, out of disrespect, I just want to put it in cringe tier. It's so awful. There's no, I don't understand how to use this thing. Legitimately, I have no clue, guys. It combos very poorly with any kind of equipment set you would bring. Replaces actually important modules and doesn't do much. It's embarrassing cooldown and short range also don't help. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll be nice. Maybe I'll bump it up just into the D tier of Spider-Man. But that's really... Look at the competition here. Spider-Man. Look at what we're comparing this thing to. We're putting it in the same tier with Spider-Man, freaking accelerated gears and rage. What the hell? That Spider-Man's only down here because it's lagging right now. It's buggy. That's why it's down here. If it wasn't buggy, it would probably be somewhere in the C tier. Alright. Rant over. Next up, we got Ice Trap. I just said rant over. Well, we're going to another rant, boys. Ice Trap is easily the most broken module in this entire game right now. Easily. So, basically how Ice Trap works, you trip it, does damage, sets your temperature to some negative amount for a specified amount of time, depending on the level, and then it also takes you time to unfreeze. This doesn't really sound that bad, but when you realize that the freezing... Actually, TX Wiki. Let's just... Not Texas Wiki. Tanki X Wiki. That's what I meant. Right, so Ice Trap. At level 1, just a non-upgraded Ice Trap basically stuns someone for 6 seconds at its maximum temperature. And the temperature is like hard-coded. So let's say you use... you have this thing. It's not going to help you. It's not going to protect you from the Ice Trap. It's ridiculous. And the more it gets upgraded, the more and more ridiculous it gets. 6 seconds is basically like already killing someone. Right? Like they are a complete sitting duck. Anyone can do any kind of follow-up to finish them off. They also take a small but interesting point of damage. It doesn't actually show that it has damage here, but also it has so many ridiculous stats. Whatever. That's not the point. The point is, this goddamn freeze duration keeps on increasing. And then keep in mind, this isn't even the full timer. 6 seconds isn't how long it's going to take you to come back to normal temperature. 6 seconds is just how long you're going to be at the worst possible temperature for your tank. Which is ridiculous. And at max level, it gets upgraded to 9 seconds. Bro, that's actually putting someone out of the game for over 10 seconds. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't be that strong for just tripping on a stupid little mine. The defender has 2 up anyways. What the hell? What were they thinking when they made this? And as I said, right, at max level, 9 seconds, but that's 9 seconds at the worst temperature. It also takes you several seconds to then come back to normal temperature, which is absurd if you're even going to live for those 9 seconds, because you probably won't. You're a sitting duck. Anyone can do a finisher on you. You're completely slowed down, turret slow, tank slow. Nothing helps you. Nothing helps you at that point. Already received some chip damage on top of that. Freeze trap is just ridiculous in this game right now. An attacker steps on this thing, he's already dead meat. This game design is just off. In my opinion, the time that this thing freezes a tank should be cut in half, straight up. It's not fair to be frozen for over 10 seconds just because you stepped on a stupid little mine here. That's like putting you out of play for the entire 10 seconds. If you just get frozen in some random corner of the map, the enemy can just completely ignore you for the next 10 seconds and just play the game and just attack your team while you're at a player disadvantage because you can't do anything. You're a frozen goddamn vegetable. Yeah, sure, you can fire back, but is it really going to be that helpful when you can't move yourself? It's for that reason I think this is the best module in the game right now. It needs to be severely nerfed. Oh god. And like, not to mention at max level, the cooldown is 40 seconds. 40 seconds, that's excuse me, but I'm pretty sure it's just like every 40 seconds you can basically keep up with an attacker's invulnerability. It's ridiculous. Stepping on this thing isn't just getting frozen, it's basically immediately dying. Yeah, sure, you don't get killed, but anyone who wants to, who's interested in slapping your booty, can do so free of charge. It's just so stupid. I hate this goddamn module. It's not fun, it's not balanced, it should be nerfed in half straight up. And what's ironic is, the only real goddamn counter to this stupid little mine is another busted ability known as Invulnerability. So these two are the most busted things in the entire game. And this is the only counter. This is the only counter to Ice Trap. So Invulnerability makes you straight up immune to everything. No more EMPs, no more explosive masses, no more goddamn stuns, no more damage in general. You could charge into their entire team. You are completely immune for over 2 seconds. This is just the top tier pick for offense in CTF. Not even offense in CTF. This thing can be used in TDM really effectively as well. It's kind of an equivalent to a force field that moves along with you. And in fact, I would argue this thing is even better than a force field in most of the scenarios, because it just protects you against more, and it has faster cooldown. So it protects you against more often. There are some cases where force field is a bit better than this thing, but generally, CTF, this thing is going to be absolute meat. TDM might be just an A tier, but still, this thing is busted everywhere. I think it needs a duration nerf, like a slight one, but it needs something to happen. It's just so annoying because it's like every single tank in the game is running this right now. You have absolutely no way of dealing with it when someone does decide to use this against you. Because you can't EMP them. Nothing else works. You can't even damage them. All you can do is just try and push them off the edge. That's it. That's the only counter. And for having no counterplay to it, this thing is ridiculously strong right now. Now, one thing that this thing has in common with EMP is that they're both actually fight winners. And if used right, you can cap flags with ease with this thing. It's incredible. It has a rather short cooldown. It cooldowns faster than repair kits, so in some cases it's actually more efficient to use this thing than the repair kit. Not to mention you can potentially waste your enemy's ammo too. And repair kit doesn't save you from ice traps, the single most goddamn stupid thing. I wish I could make another tier for ice trap. I don't think it belongs in the OP tier. I think it belongs in some like absolutely other ridiculous tier. Simply because you just get 2 of them and you only get 1 of these. So good luck pushing through even if you have 1 of these. Ice trap is just so boring. I hate ice trap so much. I hate both of these, but ice trap just takes the cake by far. Most busted thing I've ever seen. Next up, Lifesteal. I feel like this one's also an S tier. Basically, you kill a dude, you get some HP back. It's very useful for basically any playstyle that isn't Izina, I would argue. Even Izina can sometimes get use out of this just because of how stupidly balanced it is right now, but that's for another day. That's for another day. What I'm referring to is, if you're going to be playing a control playstyle, you're going to get use out of this. If you're going to try to be a wall breaker, you might still get some use out of this. And if you're going to be an attacker, you're probably still going to get use out of this. Defender, you're probably also going to get use out of this. Just any goddamn playstyle you could name, you're going to get use out of this. It's just always good to heal back up upon a kill. Playing Railgun Shaft, you're still gonna be very happy using this thing, because if you get a large kill streak, you just get all your HP back. Yeah, it has a cooldown, but that cooldown isn't that significant, I would argue. I find this to be especially good on purely offensive tanks, simply due to the fact that by the time you're gonna get in there, you probably already have taken some damage. Then you can use Invulnerability and shoot someone in the face with like Hammer, for instance, and get some of your HP back, which drastically increases your chances of survival. So yeah, generally good everywhere, especially on offense. I feel like this thing is an S tier. It just can't be any other way. And finally, ending it off with one of the most mediocre modules in the game, we have the drone. Oh god, the drone. So I find the drone to be very similar to Fiery Ring, except the drone is the Fiery Ring's like turret module counterpart. It's just so weak. It's situational. It's bad. Oh my god. The main problem with the drone is that it's just very underwhelming right now. So a major problem with the turret drone is I feel like it's this super like long activation time or lock-on time. Even at max level, it takes 2 seconds for it to lock onto a tank. Other than that, this thing does have pretty decent range, 30 meters at max level. That's quite big if you ask me. But it also kind of does pathetic damage. Look at this, 50 damage per second. Guys, do you know what is 50 damage per second? That's nothing. 75 at max level, that's still nothing. I think it should do like 120 for it to even be somewhat competitive. And have its cooldown, like activation time, reduced in half. Because right now it's just so low impact. Yeah, you get 2 of them. Yeah, their cooldowns relatively quick. But it's just they're so low impact, they barely do anything. That's why I call them the alternative to the stupid fairy ring. And I know I made, for some reason, really likes to run both of these in one tank. I couldn't tell you why. They more just look cool, but they really don't do anything that important. It's like, even if you take a look at the Surge Drone, right? 75 DPS, it exists for 18 seconds, 1.3k damage. But that's assuming your enemy isn't going to leave anywhere or go anywhere else, which they are. Or they could just hide behind cover, hide behind a force field. It completely negates all the damage these things could possibly do. Or they could just drive away. That's it. That's how easy it is to counter these things. Pathetic damage, an okay cooldown, I guess. I feel like, I don't know, despite being slightly above Fire Ring, because it actually has some control aspect, might be useful with Thunder as a finisher for Hornets that get up too close. That you like 3-shot, you do 1.8k damage over their 1.9k HP, then activate this and it finishes them off. But it's gonna take several seconds to activate. It's gonna take like 1.5 more seconds to actually shoot the dude. It's just so gimmicky. I don't know. Maybe I should keep it down in C tier. I don't think it's competitive with Engineer or Temperature Block. It's just, oh my god. It's just about as bad as Fiery Wind is. I don't know. Like, if I had to pick between the two, I don't know which one I would choose. They both seem like awful, awful options. And the main problem, there's something in common both of these have. They fit no playstyle. Like, I don't understand what playstyle this could fit. The Wallbreaker playstyle, maybe, I don't know, but they have an IZ that can easily heal off any damage the drone does, even if it does last for 18 seconds. It's a design flaw in the game. There's no reason you'd use this thing, seriously. I don't remember the last time I tried to actually use this drone. Because they just don't win you the game. They do dumb stuff. They do damage, that's it. They're not special in any other way. And the way that they even achieve this damage is super gimmicky and unreliable most of the goddamn time. So it's not even worth watching. But anyways, that's just my opinion, my tier list. I hope you can relate to this. Hope you agree. I hope this helps you. I'll leave a link to this in the description. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. See, yeah, this was a while. Oh, jeez.